Hey, before I start, this is a great event. I have loved it. This is one of my, I think maybe my favorite customer success event of the year. And I think just a shout out to Dave and Burke and Brent and all the guys who put this together. I think it's awesome. All right, so let me jump right in. So I am going to share some kind of ideas and point out, I think, some fallacies that hold us back and some insights that I've gotten out of my research. And you know, the idea I had was, look, we've talked a lot about why customer success is so important, how vital it is. Believe me, I value that. We get so much inspiration coming to an event like this. We go back supercharged and know how important we are. But I also want to dive into then, how do we do it, right? What are the things that we can actually do? What can I take back right now, operationally, that I can put into practice and get meaningful leverage right away, right? Because there's no way for me to know what all the different business models and challenges are in the room. But I think there are some principles, at least that I've found, that really can make a big difference. So maybe I'll start by just explaining a little bit about my background. I, like many of you, came to customer success through a circuitous route. I was originally an entrepreneur. I started a few companies, exited some companies, CEO. And after my fourth exit, I stepped back. I wanted to think about it a little bit because, you know, I started to realize that the tough challenges are the interesting challenges, and I asked myself, what's the hardest thing that I've ever done in all of this work? And I concluded that actually the most difficult thing I'd ever done was not to build a company and design a product and raise money and build the product and sell the product. The toughest thing I ever did in business was to make my customers consistently successful with my solution. I think it's the toughest thing we do, and to me, that means it's the most interesting thing we do. I think it's the most interesting problem in business. I love what we do. And I decided I wanted to spend the rest of my career on that. So I've gone into customer success. I've been the VP of customer success for different companies. And along the way, I have made, I'm sure, every possible mistake you can make. I have experienced every type of misery and dissonance that we all experience in customer success. And so I noticed, though, after a few years, that my experience had this consistent pattern. And the pattern was, I'd run into a challenge with customers, and I didn't know what to do, so I'd go out into the world and I'd look at what are people saying, what's the best practice, what is the, you know, what are the geniuses saying about this? And I'd bring it back and apply it, and it wouldn't work. I wouldn't get great results. And not really, not transformative results. And I'd have to chew on it. I'm dense, so it would always take a while before I discovered that the real answer was very different than what people were talking about. And that became this consistent pattern. Now, in what I do now, which is consult with companies on their customer success, what I found is that's really consistent. Lots of companies are struggling, and it's not because they're not doing it well. They're doing it very well. By the standards we set up, you're actually phenomenal at what you do. But the problem is, and I've discovered this, and I have the scar tissue to prove it, the things that make transformative difference, really big leverage against our results, are not the things everyone's talking about. So I actually want to share some what I think are really counter-conventional ideas and put it out there and see what you guys think. Okay? So this is sort of my mentality, and it's serving me well. First one, customer happiness doesn't pay. A strategy of making your customers happy is not a consistently high yield strategy. And I can prove it. Here's a thought experiment. Raise your hand if you have had a customer cancel and on their way out praise you and say how good the experience was. If your hand's not up, it must be broken. Okay, I can prove it in the reverse, okay? Raise your hand if you have an unhappy customer that's constantly burning you down, complains about everything, is never happy, and yet they keep renewing year after year. Again, there's a couple broken arms in the audience, but not many. What gives, right? What is this about? We're told that delighting the customer is everything. If we can do that, we have loyalty. And yet it hasn't been my experience. Now, full disclosure, my entire career has been in SaaS and B2B. I don't know what B2C is like. If you're in B2C, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I have no idea. And more importantly, I don't care. I only work in B2B. And I'm telling you, this has been my experience, 20 years. And it's fascinating. So what else is there, right? If we're not making them happy and satisfied, what else is there? Maybe we should make them successful. Actually, it's not just intuitively that I can prove this, there's also data on this, okay? There's a group out there called CEB. They're the people who do the Challenger sale. Have you heard of that? Great guys, incredible research. This is some other research they did. A lot of work went into this. So they went out and they said, okay, what is the mental model out there about how people think about loyalty, which in our case is renewal, right? So they said, look, you know, tell us what you think, how it works. And this is what people said. Essentially, if you don't meet customer expectations, you do pretty poorly. But if you want to do exceptionally well, you have to exceed expectations. So this is the mental model. But here's what the data showed. Yes, if you don't meet expectations, you do incredibly poorly. But exceeding expectations doesn't do much better than just meeting them. That was a shocker, even for the researchers, because we're so sure happiness is everything, right? That's like the sun will come up tomorrow morning. Well, they did a lot of research. In fact, they had 100,000 data points in this study. And they said, well, let's do this. Let's map loyalty against satisfaction. Surely there's a relationship. Well, this is what the data looks like. Fascinating, right? There's no relationship. How could it be? What else could it be? Well, you know, it actually should make intuitive sense. I mean, our customers are companies, not people. And technically speaking, companies can't have emotional experiences. Now, I know they're full of people and those matter. But it turns out you can create a phenomenal emotional experience for your customer, and they'll still churn if it's not producing something on their level of success, right? I think we all know that, but it helps to underline how profoundly important that is. In my work with companies, I see lots of companies. The companies that have a happiness-oriented motion tend to do not as well as companies that have a strictly and explicitly success-oriented motion. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. Okay, here's another idea. Your product actually doesn't create any value. Sorry, and I can prove it intuitively. Run this thought experiment. If our customer installs our software, turns it on, and nothing else, will they get any value? I heard a no. No, they won't. Why? What else does it have to be? They have to do something with it, right? And in fact, it's more than just usage. They have to change how they work. Our product enables new value, but they will not get any value unless they change the way they work. That behavior change is essential. And isn't it interesting how much of our time we end up focusing on installing, configuring, and training the software, when in fact that produces no value. The value comes when they change their process, they change their behavior. I would argue time spent on those things around the product is low leverage. Time spent with our customers on how they're going to change how they work, their behavior change, high leverage. So this is the way I say it. Customers succeed when they change how they work. And this actually is the reason why our most valuable asset isn't our knowledge of our own product. It's our knowledge of what customers do who are really successful. And we occupy this very special position where we get to see across customers. So we see the ones that are succeeding and the ones that are treading water. We have this valuable opportunity to glean that knowledge, that expertise in the domain, and share that with the customers that are struggling. Okay, another idea. Nobody wants your product. I can prove it intuitively. Again, who in here wants to buy new software, configure it, implement it, train on it, and then administer it? Neither do your customers. They don't want your product. What do they want? They want what it can do for them. A much smarter person than me said it this way. You've seen this before. This is really powerful. People don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. If we spend all our time selling, describing, configuring, training, and administering a drill, we're missing the point. They didn't want your drill. It doesn't matter how shiny it is, how easy it is, how beautiful it is, how much, whatever. Nobody cares. They want the whole. And if we don't follow and keep close custody, sacred custody even, of what their quarter-inch hole is, we will not have phenomenal results. That's a critical issue. Okay, moving on. These are the 3 ideas that I wanted to leave. Now, I've got other stuff, but it's really important. Success is vastly higher yield in customer success, that's why we call it customer success, than a strategy of happiness. We shouldn't be focused on our technology nearly so much as focused on helping them change their behavior. And we are not here to provide features, but to provide benefits. Unless we align with those benefits and make them happen, we're going to have customers that churn. It's that simple. Okay, let me move on. I want to talk about some fallacies. So there's a common mental model out there. It may not be the mental model you all have, but it's pretty common. You'll recognize it. And the idea is that our solution produces value, and that value drives the customer's success, and that success leads them to renew. It seems logical. It makes a lot of sense. The only problem is it's completely wrong. Everything on here is wrong. And boy, did it take me a long time to figure it out. But it's really important to understand why. First of all, we've already argued that the solution on its own doesn't create value without the customer's behavior or process change. So it isn't enough to turn on the solution. And now it's true, some customers come and they just know what to change. They have it all wired in, they've thought it through. Those are your innovative customers, right? Early adopters. They know what to do, but most don't. So take the opportunity to learn from those customers who knew exactly what to do and bottle that and help the customers who don't know what to do. They see the vision, you sold them on the future, but they don't know how to get there. And if we don't take ownership of responsibility to help them get there, many of them won't. Okay, secondly, value doesn't necessarily on its own drive success. Think about it this way. If we produce a benefit and it's a 1/4-inch hole and you wanted a 1/2-inch hole, we didn't win. It doesn't matter that we can drill a hole. It's not the right one. Now, it's likely that we're aligned on this, okay? Because they saw the vision, they bought the value proposition, everything. But it's amazing how much heterogeneity, how much variability there is in our customer base. Some of them are locked in on it, but others are not. And we need to help them make sure that alignment is there. Is this the benefit you were hoping for? Is this how you think about it? Is this how you measure it? Okay, let's measure it that way. Is this the amount that you would consider success? If we hit this target, is that a win? Will you say yes? And if they say yes, now we're on, that's our goal. Nothing else we do, no configuration and sidelines about integration with this or that will matter at all if we don't hit that. And in fact, nothing that doesn't drive to that matters at all. So we have to be extremely focused. Do we have those two things in alignment? If we do, then we're close. But it turns out it's not enough even to produce success. Even to produce success is not enough. Why? Well, if you think about it, when they go to renew, they're not renewing because of what we accomplished. They're renewing because of what they hope to accomplish next time. And what we accomplish this time exists almost entirely to give credibility to the plan we have for the next period. If we didn't achieve it, why should they believe we'll achieve it next time? So we have to nail it. But remember, they're not going to do a renewal just because you nailed it. It's because of what's next. And I call that velocity. It's not just about expanding the use case, and it's about everything. It's about up and to the right. If I don't have a compelling story about the next period, saying we hit it and aren't you glad you got value will not be enough. Maybe they'll renew once or twice, but in SaaS, right, it's brutal. They need to renew over and over again, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years for them to be really profitable, for our business to really work well. So I have to create velocity in every interaction, in every period, a new story, what's next. And by the way, it's not just, hey, let's add more users and do cool stuff. Sometimes it's we need to sell you something. You watch, the companies that do this phenomenally well always have a story every year. User conference, here's what we're coming out with. Here's the features that are going to be in your thing for free. Here's the stuff we want to sell you. Why is selling stuff so important? I want to stop on that. I'll tell you why. Because a buying signal is a powerful signal. If a customer tells me they want something really, really bad, but they're not willing to pay for it, that's a different signal. I want to make sure we're constantly aligning with things that matter to my customers, and buying signals are the best, clearest way I've ever found to do that. So if we don't have something additional to sell, think about your business model. If it's an all-in-one and there's unlimited usage and blah, 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 and you don't have something to sell, that's a tougher one to build a high throughput velocity motion. I like to say customers that are expanding are renewing. Companies that have a kind of protect revenue, renew the customer first, and then we'll expand, don't tend to have very high renewal. Companies that create an expansion focus about creating ever greater up and to the right, they get renewal for free. So I think it's really important to take seriously that one of our jobs is to create velocity. Always, what's next? Yes, we nailed it, now on to the next hill. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is what I call the real causal chain of customer success. Everything in orange, think about it, that's what we do. That's why we have people for this. That's why we need customer success managers. That's not what robots do. Each one of those things is a deliberate act. We have to show, we have to learn, we have to engage, we have to understand what they're doing, or we can't even change their process. Do we even know what their process is? Right? We have to be deeply embedded in an account. Those three things are why there will always be customer success managers. There's longevity in your career, good news. But if you're not doing that, not only will you not have a career, but your company might not exist. So I think those are the three critical activities of customer success. Okay, moving on. For this next section, I want to talk about some things that I've learned. I'm a nerd, okay? Full disclosure. I live in data and I love kind of understanding how things work and taking them apart. And when I became obsessed, I think is not too strong a word, with customer success, I decided that there had to be something more there. I had seen patterns consistently about how it worked, and I wanted to take it apart and try to understand it. And I have come to the conclusion that there is a core physics to the way customer success works, and particularly churn. I want to talk about that now. So the first way of stepping into this is to say, okay, when I go to a new client and they say, hey, I have 30% churn or 20% churn or whatever it is, I say, I have no idea what that means. Because what you're doing is you're squishing into that, you're conflating all sorts of things that don't match. Like I have young customers in there that are a month old and old customers that are 3 years old and all sorts of things. So we know that customer churn is not linear, it's non-linear, right? So I need to pull that apart. And the best way to do that is cohort analysis. So a lot of you have done this, very useful. You've seen it, you have this it's like a spreadsheet with boxes, right? And they're green and they're yellow and then they're red, and that's the oldest cohort, and then the next. Very valuable. Now, I like to do it a little differently. I take that cohort data, and if you draw it as a line, it looks like that. Okay, and what is this telling us? It's the number of cohorts on the left and time across the bottom, right? So early on, call this all the customers we sold in first quarter 2014, okay? Early on, we lose a lot, and then less and less until the cohort stabilizes, right? Hopefully, right? It turns out, this is what we call a exponential decay curve. It's like radioactive decay from chemistry. You may remember that with half-lives and everything, right? Half-life is how long it takes to lose half the cohort. All right, that's what this is. If you're really nerdy, that dotted line is what we call an asymptote. It's the line representing where that red line is trending toward, right? Even if we don't have all the data, we can see where it's going to end up. Okay, so what do we learn from this? I know this is nerdy. Let me bring it together. This actually has tremendous power to give us insight into how churn works, okay? And let me explain why. So first of all, the way this is drawn, all the customers who will be successful in the long run are below the line, right? And all of those that will fail sooner or later are above the line. Now it turns out all customer cohort decay curves look like this. I call these decay curves. They all look like this. I've done hundreds, probably thousands of them at this point. They all look like this. The difference is the slope. what do you want in the slope? You want it to be really flat and high, right? We want to lose very few customers. One like this isn't so good. A really steep one would be worse. Make sense? That's the intuition. Okay, so what do we learn from this? Where's the kind of insight? Well, there's actually 3 insights I want to share with you. Okay, first is actually that dotted line is not flat. It's oblique, and the reason it is because actually some customers just go out of business. There's what I call exogenous stress. Not very much, so we shouldn't make a story around that is why we're losing our customers, but it happens. But it's actually more oblique the way the green line is, because actually even after we make a customer, we sometimes successful, we sometimes lose them, right? They churn out, they found a better product or whatever. So how oblique that is turns out to be kind of important. But this is the way they all look. The only difference is how steep the slope is. Make sense? Okay. So it turns out there are actually only 3 things you can do to flatten this curve. Okay? First is you could just sell fewer failed customers. If we knew who they were, right, we'd just stop selling them, right? Maybe you think of them as bad fit customers. If we could do that, we could flatten the curve. Or 2, we could make more of the customers we do get successful. We can move that green line up, okay? And 3rd, of those we make successful, we could lose fewer of them over the long run by not taking care of them, not staying competitive, et cetera. Okay. Actually, mathematically, that's the only 3 things you can do with churn. Now, what you do inside those gets more interesting, but that's the only 3 ways to flatten this curve. I call the first one affinity. How good is the use case fit with what we do? Do they want a 1/4-inch hole and we produce a 1/4-inch hole? That's a good fit. And there are other aspects too. I call this bonding. Think of it as onboarding. How quickly can we lock in results, change their behavior, and get them results that are measurable and materialized that they care about and call a success? And then 3rd, I call this velocity. We talked about this. Over the long run, we have to keep creating more and more up into the right experiences. Okay, so that's the setup. Here are the 3 big insights that I found that I think are really actionable. First, when on that curve is the biggest opportunity to make a change? Because it's an exponential decay curve, right? Your intuition, without having seen any of this, is, well, the earlier you help a customer set up for success, the better, right? This proves that, but it even takes it further. It isn't just better, it's exponentially better. And when I say earlier, I don't mean from the day we've sold them and we have our kickoff. I mean earlier. So when I go to work with companies, I'm actually talking to them, how are you marketing this? How do you describe it? How do you sell it? How do you set up a customer for a successful experience? Do you align, their expected outcome with the one we produce? Do we make sure we're connecting those dots, right? Do we market features instead of benefits? Right? Do we sell features instead of benefits? Not good, right? So actually, earlier means earlier. The earlier in the customer journey you can make a difference, the bigger it is. I won't take the time, but I can show how that a small change in slope on that curve at the very beginning turns out to be a huge difference in the long run. We do that when I work with my clients. We actually draw these curves with their data, and it's really cool to see what you can learn about this. So early is important. We all know intuitively how this thing got sold is huge in how likely the customer is to succeed, right? Did they promise things that we don't do? Did they fail to align with the thing we do? Do they warn the customer that behavior change is coming and is essential to success? All those things that they might not do because they want to get a sale and it's the 31st of the month, right? They're important. When I work with companies, we don't fudge over that. It's not all entirely from the moment we start. That's important. Okay. I can prove it mathematically a little bit. If you were to drop the number of bad fit customers you sold by half, this is a theoretical exercise, and then I reset this back to 100%, you get a disproportionately large improvement in your customer success outcomes. This is doing nothing else differently. This just helps you visualize how profoundly important it is to make decisions that have an impact early on, like how you sell and how you onboard. Okay, next. This is an interesting one. It's fascinating to me. I never spend time looking at exit analyses. This is where you go ask all your churn customers what they did, why they left, right? And they all have a ready answer and they're all sure it's right, and you build a pie chart with 19 slices and try to figure out how do we work on some of these. I never waste time with them. Why? because I actually believe the difference between successful customers and unsuccessful customers, successful customers change their behavior. Who's the worst person to ask about whether they failed and whether they understood that behavior change? Someone who didn't make it. So it's very difficult, and it can be very distracting to go focus on what they're telling you rather than what I think is the core issue. So what do? I do the opposite. I go and I talk to successful customers. And I dig in deep. What did you do? Not in general, specifically, how did you roll this out? What behavior change? Who needed to be involved? How did you introduce it? Did you have a pilot team? Did you then market those results? The details matter, because if you go talk to all your failed customers, there's 100 reasons why they failed, and they're all sure that's the reason. But if you talk to your successful customers, there aren't that many differences. The way they succeed is pretty consistent, and you can bottle that and turn it into a onboarding and an emotion in your customer success that gives the customers who didn't know how to do it the benefit of that expertise. How does an organization change? We have to own that. Okay, I like to think of it like, the kid who's graduating from college and calls up every failed person he knows and says, okay, I want to be a success, tell me why you failed. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? We don't want to make the same mistake. Learn from successes, bottle that, and share that with customers that struggle. Okay. When you have behavior change, this is what happens. The asymptote moves up. It's high leverage. It's extremely important. We spend a lot of time getting the onboarding process right. It's exceedingly important to do that right, and to make sure that it's not about training and installing and provisioning. It's about behavior change, strategy, expertise, and success. Okay, enough. Last one. I said this before, customers who are expanding or renewing. It can be scary, right? To think in terms of, well, instead of protecting the renewal, let's go after an upsell. But think about what position, what posture that puts you in versus the customer. I can't ask you for more money, which, if you think about it, that's really what a renewal is. I'm asking you to buy again, but I can't do that if I haven't got something to promise, something excellent in the future that will matter to them. I've got to come up with that. And if my mentality and my body language and my position is, well, we're delivering, right? And do you want to renew? Would that be okay? We can't have that, right? We've got to go in confident and saying, yes, we nailed it, but look what's coming up. We have to, and we can't be confident just because we said it. We have to be confident because we've really figured out something. This is a sincerity test for customer success, in my opinion. If we don't have a plan why it's better next year, how we're going to add more teams or more functions or more value, I'm not sure why they should renew. We owe that to the customer, right? So I think it's critical to understand why that, vision is so important to how successful you are. So when you look at it on a churn curve, it's like this. It flattens the curve. Now it's the lowest leverage of the three, but that doesn't mean it's the least important. And in fact, it's one of the best indicators, one of the best signals that everything else is in alignment, that you can then, you found the right hole, you matched it up, they want it, you created the behavior change that led to it, and then you got the results. Then and only then can I go in and say, yeah, we killed it last year, look what we're going to do next year, or whatever the next period is. It's maybe the clearest indicator of how well the whole system is functioning, but it isn't on its own the only way you achieve that, as you've seen. So I think it's really important. That's why I call it velocity. It's more than just adding more users or what. It's the whole package of getting them to have another vision. It's why what we do is so both hard but awesome. I honestly think there's nothing more interesting to do in any of these companies. People come to me all the time and they say, hey, Greg, what should our customer strategy be? And I say, as opposed to what? What other strategy is there? Your snack room strategy, or, right? Your swag strategy? This is it. In SaaS, this is it. We own the customer. There's something I like to call severely beaten puppy syndrome. And it's endemic in customer success. We're tired of being the afterthought and the blame for what's happening. We've got this customer journey. The customer churns out here. Where does everyone look for the cause? Here. But really, it's an expression of what's happening in that entire system. We have to look at it as a system. Everybody's contributing to that, right? We've talked a lot about that over the last 2 days. But some people will say, well, look, Greg, you want us to change how we market and what we say on our website and how we sell? I mean, isn't that the tail wagging the dog? No, we're the dog, damn it. We're the dog, we own the customer. Almost all the revenue they ever produce for our company will be because of what we did with them, right? We are the confident people. We know what they're saying. We know what they're doing. Nobody knows more about our business than the customer success people. We're the center of the business. That's what I teach my clients, and it's true. You cannot succeed in SaaS, certainly not in SaaS B2B, without making this the center of what you do. How could it have ever been an afterthought? I don't know how we got here. But we're going to fix that. The people in this room, no more beaten puppy. We're the dog, right? Am I right? Yes! That's what I'm talking about. You guys, this has been awesome. There's been so much inspiration here. I get so excited. I'm ready to go back charged up and make it great. We change the world. Honestly, we do. And I feel like there's nothing I'd rather do, and there's no people I'd rather be associated in doing with. Thank you for being here. Thank you for those I've met. I'm dying to meet you all. Come up and see me, and thanks again.